First of all, this hour, very pleased to welcome to the show the Reform UK MP for East Wiltshire, Danny Kruger. Hello, Danny.
Morning, Kevin.
Good morning. Now, it's a big day for you, press conference later, and you've been put in charge, shall we say, of Reform's vision for this country, for this state going forward. You have big plans for the civil service, for example. In my view, you quite rightly point out that this country has no need for 500,000 civil servants. It has no need for some of the very expensive buildings that are hired and rented on the part of the government, on the part of civil service departments, especially since so many of these civil servants don't seem to ever come to their offices. They work from home. So you've been put in charge, Danny, of Reform's vision for the future, a leaner, meaner state, if you like. Tell me, well, we'll try to outline what it is that you intend to do if, and I'm sure you would prefer to say when, Nigel Farage becomes Prime Minister.
Well, no, it's an if, isn't it? The one thing we can't control is the election. But if we win, Nigel Farage, and by the way, he's responsible for the vision, not me. I'm in charge of preparing for implementation. What we want to do on day one is to grip the government machine. I think the reason that so much doesn't work in our country is because ministers, they've got the wrong ideas. They don't really believe in the interests, the values of the British people. But even if they did, the functions of the state are not under their proper control. And you get ministers of all parties complaining about this. So the first thing we've got to do is to make sure the civil service actually respects ministers and that ministers respond to Parliament, that are accountable to Parliament. And that's simple principle of a democracy that we've lost. So there are changes to the civil service code, the way the rules work. But the other thing is to get the costs under control. And for both those reasons, to make sure ministers are in charge and to cut the costs, we're proposing to close a whole number of big, expensive government buildings spread across the SW1 postal district and restore Whitehall to Whitehall. What we call Whitehall used to be just that street, that runs up from Parliament Square past Downing Street. That's where the government of the UK should be located, not spread out across SW1. So there are tens of millions of pounds to be saved from each of these buildings that are leased by the taxpayer. So we will close those, cut the headcount of the civil service dramatically, and relocate the departments of state back into Whitehall itself and put them properly under the control of the cabinet.
Also, I think at the heart of your plans to change Britain, if you like, to make the state smaller, is to change the way the civil service actually operates. You talk, interview in the papers today, you talk about how you don't want a continuation of the system whereby Prime Minister Nigel Farage sits down and, I don't know, Chancellor of the Exchequer Danny Kruger sits down and the relevant private secretaries, head of the civil service, said to you, well, this is the way it operates. Do you want a new desk? Do you want a new decoration? And we'll carry on as was. What you want, I think, Danny, is to get back to a proper system whereby ministers and prime ministers and secretaries of state tell the civil service what they're going to do, as opposed to, I think a system's been going on for some time since Tony Blair, the other way round.
Exactly. So there's a sort of theatrical moment that we're all familiar with when a new government comes in. The Prime Minister goes into number 10, opens that famous door, and then the Cabinet Secretary, who's the head of the civil service, greets him or her, and then what happens? They're escorted into the cabinet room and sat down and more or less, given the rules of the House by the civil servants. And they say, Prime Minister, we've looked at your manifesto and this is how we propose to implement it. Whereas what we're going to do is to go in and say, thank you very much, this is how we're going to implement it. These are our plans. We've drafted legislation. We've got new codes for ministers and civil servants drawn up. We're going to rearrange Whitehall itself in the following way. And if you would kindly execute the plans that we have prepared, we'd be very grateful. That's the plan. And if they don't do it, and this is the other critical point, they need to be properly answerable to ministers. The myth at the moment is that the civil servants serve politicians. In fact, they serve themselves. And by the way, listen, let's not make this personal. They're decent, good, very capable people in Whitehall. The problem is the structure of power is all concentrated not in the hands of the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, but in the hierarchy of the civil service itself. That's what's got to change. Civil servants are unelected, they serve the government, and they should answer directly to ministers. That's what we're going to do.
And so what you're essentially saying, Danny, is the old image of the sort of Yes Minister comedy series, the sitcom, whereby civil servants basically treated their ministers and prime ministers like puppets on strings to be manipulated and made to do what the civil servants want. It's not a million miles from the truth today.
I mean, this is always the case. I mean, it is a remarkable thing how just relevant Yes Minister is. And it was written obviously it was in the 1980s, and this was the era of Margaret Thatcher, who was definitely in charge of the government. But she was also dealing with a system by which the unelected, I mean, they're doing it in what they think is the national interest. The problem is we've got a civil service, particularly now, not so much in those days, it's much worse now. We've got a civil service with a completely alien set of attitudes to the rest of the country. I mean, they are overwhelmingly Guardian reading, Remain voting, liberals. And there's obviously a place for that in our politics, but it shouldn't be dominant. And so what we need is civil servants who, A, reflect the attitudes of the country more generally, but also crucially, answer to the ministers. And that's only going to happen if we go in with a real intention to change things. So that means changing the rules, particularly changing the system of promotion, hiring and firing, also bringing in more political appointments. So, there's this great sort of aversion to the idea of politicizing government. Well, it is a political business. I mean, if we didn't have politics, we'd have pure bureaucracy, which is sort of what we do have, which itself is very politicized. What we need is the proper politics of a democracy. So that means, every other head of government in the world brings in a whole bunch of their own people who believe what they believe, who've worked with them in opposition, prepared the plans for government. They come in with them and take charge of the government machine. When a British government changes, the new ministers bring in a couple of 20-something special advisors. And as I say, the senior civil servants say, we'll take it from here, Minister. And that's what's got to change.
And so in a sense, you've got Zia Youssef is doing a doge around the various councils that Reform UK has won. Presumably, hopefully, you'll win more at the next local elections in May. But you're going to sort of be doing that on a national level, making government more efficient, generally speaking. How did we get to this point, though, Danny? I mean, when just the sheer number, you think, hang on, there's more than 500,000 civil servants working for the government. Yeah. How did we get to this point? I believe you point the finger at Tony Blair, that he has bureaucratised this country more and more, and then your former party were no slouches at it either.
That's right. So 500,000 civil servants just serving national government, millions more working in the public services, local government as well. And by the way, Zia Youssef is overseeing the whole programme of transformation that we are leading, including at the national level. And we've learned a lot from the experience of local government, how obstructive and difficult and bureaucratic it is and how hard it is to make change. That's what we're underway there. But for the national level, yes. I mean, the answer to your question is, the civil service grew enormously under Tony Blair. When the financial crisis hit and the Cameron government came in, the numbers started coming down. Then I'm afraid to say, this is the most shameful thing, after Brexit, when we took back control of our government, the civil service went zooming up. So rather like with, after Brexit, immigration went up, exactly what the Brexit voters didn't want to happen, happened. Whitehall grew, immigration grew. That's the dysfunction of the British state. So if we could just get back to the pre-Brexit size of the civil service, we'd be saving billions of pounds, tens of billions of pounds a year. And that's just the beginning, because actually we need to undo the Blair era reforms. Firstly, the growth of the civil service, but also this great bureaucratisation, this outsourcing of responsibility from Parliament to the civil service, to the judiciary, to quangos, to a whole range of unelected bodies, including international courts. We've got to restore the power of Parliament and the power of ministers who are answerable to Parliament. That's where the source of government, the source of power needs to be. It will be a smaller state, a leaner and more agile state, and it will be one that answers to Parliament and to the public. What
would you do, for example, you're probably aware, the Ministry of Defence has 60 diversity officers. They call themselves protecting the protectors. What would you do about those 60 diversity officers in the Ministry of Defence?
Well,
please tell me you'd get rid of them.
Well, I mean, I wonder if they're civilians, yes, let them go. If they're actually armed forces personnel, perhaps they should go and bolster our denuded front line. So obviously that's totally wrong and inappropriate. I mean, there are so many functions in Whitehall. I mean, there's over 30,000 people in policy across the system. You've got thousands of people in HR. You've got comms is enormous. Over 5,000 comms officers in Whitehall. I mean,
yeah, and they never answer the phone, by the way.
Well, quite. I mean, the paradox is we all know this from the real world. The bigger the bureaucracy, the less efficient it is, the less work people do, and harder it is for the customer. I mean, back in the day, Sir Robert Peel, who founded the police and ran the Home Office, and this was in the days when the Home Office basically did everything, all domestic policy. He had less than 20 officials working for him. When Lloyd George took his famous People's Budget through in 1911, he had 25 officials. That was the Treasury, was 25 people. These people were running an empire, and we do not need these vastly swollen offices of state. We need, and by the way, technology means we could do so much more. We could outsource so much more, and streamline and make government much more efficient, as increasingly is happening in certain areas. I mean, the passport office is a success story. That's an example of where governments do quite a good job now, much cheaper than it used to. So we can improve the system and make it much cheaper.
A couple of news questions, if you don't mind, Danny, before you go. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and good luck with your press conference later. Do you expect this migrant sex offender who was so farcically released last Friday, 3 days on the run, Hadush Kebatu, the government actually said when he was caught on Sunday, he'll be deported on Tuesday. That's today. That was then watered down to he'll be deported within a week. They're now saying he'll be deported as soon as possible. Two questions on this. Do you expect him to be deported anytime soon? And if they can deport this guy, why aren't they setting about deporting other foreign prisoners to free up some jail space?
Well, they absolutely should be. In terms of what will happen in this case, I mean, I suppose I kind of expect that he will go, because they're going to have the entire weight of the government making sure he does. The Prime Minister himself will be personally insisting that it happens. But that goes to the core of our problem, doesn't it? The state doesn't work, and you've got tens of thousands of people who should be deported, foreign criminals, and the Prime Minister can't take a personal interest in every single one of those. So we have a broken system. The answer to the problem is firstly by not allowing illegal immigrants into the country in the first place. That's the primary way to stop this problem. But in terms of those foreign nationals who commit crimes here, we need to absolutely speed up the deals that we're doing with other countries to take their nationals back, and we can be much more. We can use a much heavier stick on that. We can use our trade policy, our aid policy, our defence policy, foreign policy. We can freeze these countries out of the sort of the embrace of the UK internationally, and these are developing countries that need our help and our support internationally. So of course, if we insist on it, they will take their foreign nationals back. That's what we need to do, including, by the way, into Europe. I mean, there's a whole load of Polish criminals that don't get removed, Romanians. So we need to do whatever is necessary to get these foreign criminals out of our country. Absolutely.
Last question. Nigel Farage hosted a very good, I thought, press conference yesterday on the rape gang scandal, flanked by Ellie Reynolds, one of the victims. She, of course, is saying that this proposed rape gang inquiry is nothing more than a cover-up. They're trying to remove the focus from the culprits, who are mainly Muslim men of Pakistani origin. The Labour government don't like the idea of pointing the finger at them. We know that the rape gang scourge is continuing all over the country. We've just focused on a story in Dundee where a gang of 5 have just been jailed for terrible activities up in Scotland. So it's still going on. We have a mayor here in London, Sadiq Khan, who seems to be in a kind of denial, saying that it's definitely not happening here, whereas the Met Police has just announced we'll be having a look at 9,000 potential historical cases of rape, gang, sexual abuse of young, predominantly white, vulnerable girls. What would reform, given, let's imagine you came to power tomorrow, what would you do about this entire mess of a situation? The inquiry and the fact it's still going on, and the fact we have authorities and officials like Sadiq Khan who still want to pretend it's not going on.
Well, quickly, in answer to the question what we would do now, we would make it absolutely clear that the police are required to pursue these allegations of criminality without any concern for what they call community relations, meaning basically they have to soft pedal where there's a suspicion or indeed evidence of particular minority groups being predominantly responsible. I mean, they can't let political correctness get in the way of their investigations and of justice, and we can direct them to that effect. And then on the question of what we do about the overall situation and the historic scandal of these gangs, what Nigel is proposing is that Parliament uses its teeth, which it does have and very rarely uses. It's an interesting feature of our system. And Parliament should set up a commission that works across party to get to the bottom of what has happened. And it can use semi-legal powers to do that, to compel witnesses and to summon evidence. So clearly the government has lost all legitimacy, doesn't have the trust of victims or the communities anymore. So Parliament now, I think, has to step forward and take responsibility to conduct a proper investigation of its own into what has happened, so that we can bring truth and shed light on this terribly dark episode in our nation's history, and ensure that when Reform get into power, as I hope we will have a proper understanding of how to prevent this ever happening again.
Danny Kruger, thank you so much for your time. Good to talk to you. Danny Kruger there, MP, Reform UK MP for East Wiltshire.